So I got about half of them done here. I'm not soldering them in yet, though. I'm going to double check everything before I do that. Just going through the color codes here. This is brown, red, black, orange, brown. Brown, red, black. So that's brown, red, black, orange, brown. So this is R11. So get that little sucker bent here. It's hard to see, I know. Just put the camera in a vise. So that's the orange. So this is brown, red, black, orange, brown. Brown, red, black, orange, brown. Brown, red, black, orange, brown. That goes into R11. Put that right in there. Get those kind of out of the way there a little bit. Alright, I'm going to keep doing this for a while. Alright, so I got all of these loaded. And I'll tell you, it does really help to have a meter. Because if you look at the meter, I don't know if you can see that. Let's see the meter. Put that in the shot or not. It's kind of hard to see the contrast there. It's just a little cheap ass fucking Radio Shack meter, but these are awesome. So if I look at any one of these, let's go with the R3, which is a 1K. So if I measure R3, comes up as 1K. So that's really actually quite helpful to have a meter. You don't need one if you can really see the colors really well, which, to be honest with you, even with the magnifier, it's difficult. But anyway, all the resistors are in. I haven't soldered them yet, but probably what I'm going to do next. So, alright, so soldering always begins with what I call tinning the iron, and that is basically putting a little piece of solder on the tip and then turning it on. And I usually turn it up to like 4 or so. It doesn't have to be that hot, but I just let it sit in there. Guess I should get that flammable stuff away from it. Let it sit in there for a minute. It only takes a minute or so, and that stuff gets pretty hot. So, soldering iron's heating up right now. Be right back. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about proper soldering technique. I'm not necessarily going to demonstrate it, but I am going to talk about it. So the idea is that you get your iron, kind of hot, and make sure that the tip is beautiful and silvery, and you can just test it that it's hot enough with a little bit of solder, and also helps clean off the, looks like not quite that hot, maybe 3.5 or so. So the idea with soldering is that you get the elements that you want to solder hot, and then you apply the solder, and that's the recommended technique. Now it's going to be difficult for me to show you this because it's kind of in the way here, but basically what you do is you add the iron to the, and then you add the solder like that. That's supposedly how you're supposed to do it. Now I don't know if you can see that, but that's a nice clean solder joint. It comes through a little bit on that side, but it doesn't really need to. It doesn't need to be a lot. It just needs to be clean. It needs to be anyway, a couple more here. So add heat, add a little solder, let go. Add heat, a little bit of solder, let go. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a lot of solder. You want to make sure that the connection is, that the solder itself is completely surrounded. There's no holes. And you also don't want what's called a cold solder joint, which is basically a not heated up properly target. So the target of this solder in this particular case is the pad and the lead. So again, you add the heat, and then you add the solder, and then you let go. So that's kind of how you're supposed to solder. It's nice, clean solder joints. No cold there. It's very hard to see, but you can see these first four that I've done. The rest of these are open, so that's what they look like. It's very difficult to see, I understand, but I'm going to go ahead and just solder this off real quick. One other thing I wanted to point out, this is important too. Now there's a rule. I suppose there's like a count. I don't remember what it is. It's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and whatever. But it's important that when you actually heat the pad and apply the solder, that you let it set long enough for it to weld, because it does take a second. And if you don't let it weld, then it becomes cold and it moves around a little bit. So it's important that you heat the pad, apply the solder, and then let it set for just long enough for it to dry, which only takes a second. But it's important, because if you keep going fast and fast, you'll keep moving these things around, and they won't. The one right behind you, if you go too fast, it just won't have a chance to dry properly. Anyway, one other little point. Okay, so they're all soldered. Now I'm just going to clip off the leads because they are done. These little resistor leads. It's in my way now, more or less. I'm going to flush cut them, but I'm going to get them close. They're just above the solder joint. I don't want to cut into the solder joint. Just want to cut it just above, just in case I find one, which I've already inspected the board, so it's fine. But if I did find one that had a little bit of a hole in the solder, or a cold joint, I could just go back and kind of touch it up. But I've already inspected them all under the magnifier thingy, so we're good there. And again, I just want to, you can feel it's quite rough, because I did leave. You can't probably see that, but there's a little bit of little Sharpie thingies there. And like I said, I have inspected this under my lamp, and all the joints are very nice and pretty on both sides. Alright, so now I'm going to start on the capacitor. And that's going to be a little tricky because I think I'm short. But anyway, let's get on this. So when it comes to these capacitors, there's a little trick to these things. If you just take one, and I'll just show you real quick how that works. If you just take one and you just toss it in the hole like that, it's going to come down. The possibility is that you can get the insulation of the capacitor into the solder joint, which is not good. So you do not want to do that. So what you want to do, as you can see here, how I've soldered that off the board a little. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but at least the leads are clear of the pad. So how you do that is you just kind of take this and just bend it out just a little bit. It doesn't take much. And usually only one side would be enough, but I'm doing both sides just to kind of demonstrate. So this particular one is a 301. So the 301 goes in C9. So I'll show you how that looks. C9 is right there, right next to this other one. So let's kind of put it in there. You kind of see how bending those legs makes it stand up a little bit, so that you're not getting the solder into the capacitor material at all. So anyway, I just thought I'd point that out, and then I just kind of left them like that. Do the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's kind of the, I think I remembered it now since it's been like so long. But the soldering thing goes like, so you heat pad 1, 2, 3, add solder 1, 2, 3, and then hold 1, 2, 3, let it flow, and then up. So that is the that's a better explanation, I guess, of the solder thing. But if you see, these are going to stand up off the board a little bit, but that's fine. Plenty of room in there. But the idea being that you don't want this material here, up here, to get into that pad, because it could cause just a connection problem. So anyway, there's that little trick. All right, so here is all the electrolytics, or at least the ones they gave me, mounted and soldered. I usually put all the nomenclature facing the same way. That's just for consistency. It doesn't really matter. These are not directional. Anyway, there's all of those. Nice clean solder joints. They all stand up about pretty much the same height, which is also kind of the way I planned it there.